Okay, this time on Captain Chaos Laboratory, we're going to go over the Department 56 Gondola. It's an older piece, and this one is pretty much just pieces. So here's the platform for one of the houses, and then I believe it was this one, was up on a really tall hill. Let's see, is that one line up? Yeah, that one should have been on this small platform. So this is just a parts piece, and somebody has a question on the gondola on how to open it up and fix it. Now, I will let you know that the reason the gondola works and it doesn't move is because they are filled with gravel. Like 1.5 pounds of it. So, when you open this up, you see that tape right there? That's full of gravel. I took the gravel out. The base also had gravel, and then the tall mound, if you have this piece, you know that it sits at an angle, so it goes back and forth, which was this house. This plate attached to another plate, and inside that was the majority of this bag of gravel. That is how this doesn't move, and that is why the piece is so heavy. You're like, wow, it's thin plastic, the bottom's hollow, there's nothing in there. Well, on this base, because you have to unscrew this base to get to the house, so you can get to the screws to take the house off. So when you unscrew this base, this entire square was full of gravel, right there as you saw. And this one's the same way, except this one has much more. And let's see, it also says, do not microwave, or it says not microwave or oven safe, hand wash only, functional decorative article, not a toy. I still have questions. Why do they say don't put this thing in an oven? What happened when these were made that required them to put that safety warning on it? That is crazy. Absolutely insane. So anyhow, I'm going to show you what the insides look like, because I've had some questions on these. So here is your gondola with your drive mechanism, and apparently the cable got twisted. There we go. So how this works, here's the circuit board for it. I open this up so I get the circuit board out. So this circuit board sits right here, and as the gondola moves back and forth, you notice it's not a complete circle. It's got stoppers. What that stopper does is when it gets all the way through, and this one, the knot's right here. I don't know if you can kind of see that knot. Not really. There you go on my finger. What that knot does is it pulls this. See how that moved? And then when it comes back around, it pushes. So what it does is you see this switch moving back and forth. When it goes back and forth, it sends a signal via the green and black wire here to your motor right there to reverse directions. So it's not terribly hard to take apart. Just be aware that you're going to have a whole bunch of gravel spill everywhere. I had to clean up off my bench, off my floor, off of me. I had no clue it was full of gravel. This is a parts piece, and I took it apart because I had to see all the components, and I just cut the wires off the motor and took it out. So there it is. If this fails, which is why I took it apart, because somebody else's failed, it's either going to be this switch or one of these transistors or resistors. But if the microchip right here fails, yeah, you're pretty much, it's just garbage. So you can sometimes find these microchips and resolder them. Sometimes. You can see all the solder pins right there. There are those two beautiful lines that are parallel to each other. Kind of looks like runway landing lights. The chip, for those who are curious, the chip on this one is a 41 C like cat, N like Nancy, J like Jim, M like Mary. So 41C9NJM. The second is Texas Instruments, which also indicates it's an older piece because it's Texas Instruments. The second part number on it is Charles Daniel 4042 Betty Edward. So CD 4042BE. That chip, what tells it to go back and forth. It tells the transistors to fire differently to cause it to do its thing. So the reason I took it apart is because that one was sent to me. This one is not reversing like it's supposed to. So I'm assuming, which is weird, it's a slightly different edition apparently, because white top, green top. White sub base, green sub base. Still got the same motor. Still got the same gearbox. Still got the same off-on switch. Everything's the same. Let me check the chip on this one. See, this one's a completely different chip. So this is a different year. This one is an HCF 4042BE made by their symbol is ST in Malaysia. So it's the same chip number, but the secondary number is different, which is W990300042. So they did have a couple of different companies apparently make their processors. As far as the rest of the board goes, put them side by side, you can see that this board's a lighter color, this one's a darker color. I'm assuming that the one I have is older. I could be wrong. The jumpers are in the same spot. The resistors have the same color bands. No, this outer resistor doesn't. And this outer resistor doesn't. The rest of them appear to. So you have a couple of chip numbers to have this reset. And on the back of the house, it tells you it is 6 volt DC. So if you're not sure what your power supply is supposed to be, that's what I like about these older pieces, is they actually give you the powers. Their newer ones are all that 56.12345. That's the power supply you're supposed to use. And yakety schmackety. And it gets annoying because you don't know what it's supposed to take. So I was going to show you how this thing works. I was going to find my 6 volt power supply. Might just have to use my machine. Let's get the gravel. Now, this gravel could be used for your display if you're just throwing yours away. You know, you can make your own gravel walkway or a flower display or something. I keep little decorative gravel for my display. Like my train tracks, I fill the tracks with fine gravel for floral stuff. Yeah. So just because it's broken and it's not repairable doesn't mean you have to toss it. Where is my... There it is. So we'll use this and we're going to test his circuit board, since I have not had a chance to work on it yet, and that's what I plan to do today, is work on a lot of these pieces that have come in. Oops, too high. 6 volts. There we go. The motor is not even spinning. That's weird. There we go. It's not reversing directions. It's also not spinning very well. So we're going to set that one aside, and let's put this one back into here. So I'm going to set this here. I'm going to have to solder the wires back to the motor. Not a big deal. Turn on the soldering iron, like so. Wonder if he's got both a bad motor and a bad board. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have the complete gondola. And that's because, again, it was given to me as a broken part. Basically, it's the bases that were bad. The mechanisms were fine. It was what it sits on where all the, stones or rocks are. That's the part that was bad. Come on, get up to temperature. It says you're up to temperature, but you're not heating up. There we go. There's a little bit of a delay between what the machine says and what the soldering iron thinks. You can take this assembly apart to do the soldering. I'm not going to. I'm just going to solder it while it's in the assembly because there is plenty of room to maneuver. But it does help if I actually strip these two wires here. You definitely don't want this thing not to be able to reverse because it's not a circle, or excuse me, it's not a complete loop of string, and of course the cars don't fit through the little holes in the buildings. So if you lose your ability to change directions, that's a problem. And surprisingly, I haven't seen too many gondolas fail, or at least I haven't heard of too many. This is the first, and luckily I had a parts one that was given to me by a club member. He said he didn't want it anymore and it didn't know if it worked right, but the problem with it was the bases. Now let's turn that off so I can quit bumping it. The bases, that was the problem. So that's why I just took it apart. I need a better solder connection. Here we go. There we go. So let's make sure this one works like it's supposed to. It did, and I did take it apart, so there's a chance, Anytime you work with something electrical, and especially when it's old, you never know. So. There we go. So, first thing we do is give it power. And we're going to turn it on. You can watch that pulley. I hope you can see. Yeah, you can see the pulley just fine. See how it's switching back and forth. And when I did it on his unit, it did not switch back and forth. That is the problem. And the thing is this switch on this one here is nice and crisp. Actually, it's not as crisp as that one. You can hear a click. This one's a little more pronounced. So this might be the switch. So we'll test the switch. Let's disconnect this so that way it doesn't do the high-pitched beeping sound when the wires touch each other. And we're going to be just set that right there for now. So this switch right here has these two rows plus these two ends, so you have a total of 8 connections. 2 of them technically should just be the mounting connections, meaning there's no power running through them. It's just soldered to the board because it's not screwed to the board. So you're only going to be dealing with the 6 in the middle. Normally, you have power going to like the center as an example, and then power going out. So if it's on one side, it goes one direction, on the other side, it goes the other direction. It's like a T-tap. I don't know how they did this one, but we're going to find out together. To test it, you need to go to ohms or continuity on a tester. Mine's an auto-adjusting one. If yours is non-auto-adjusting and has solid numbers like 20 ohms, 200 ohms, 2000 ohms, we're on 20 ohms. So I'll check in the tracks. So it does look like the center is, the center bottom is the incoming power, and then the outer tracks aren't. Although this one is kind of strange. This one's soldered to the ground. Right there. Yeah. Technically that should be fine. Let's see how this thing does. So here to here is open. So I'm getting 0.3 ohms, and we'll flip it right there, and hopefully it says 0. It doesn't, or does it? Nope, it says 3.4, 0.2 megohms, and the other direction is open. So there's a good chance it's just got a bad switch. Problem is, it's finding this exact switch. It just says MSC on the front. What does this one say? This one says AG. Oh, it's upside down. TOY. Huh. Toy. Huh. Interesting name for a switch when it specifically says it's not a toy. I'm just going to check the other pins just to see if the other pins have any connection, because I only see the solder tracks only going to the bottom pins. Yeah, the top pins have no connection whatsoever. So we're good there. So let's flip the switch back. Yeah, 0.2. And open. I flip the switch. There we go. Now we have good continuity on that. Yeah, the switch has got bleed through, or the internal section of the switch is failing. So the first time I did it, when I flipped the switch to your perspective of the right or up, that side had no connection. The second time I just did it, it had connection, but the left side still had connection, which means it's sending power to both sides of the switch instead of just one. So the switch isn't acting as a switch in one direction. So, but to make it easier, I'm just going to swap the boards right now while I hunt down a switch. It'll just be easier to stick something in that works and then deal with finding this switch later. Only for the fact that it has to be the same dimensions with the same long nose. I have switches that look just like this, but they're short nose. If they're short nose, they do not grab in that finger right there, which is what changes its direction. So now, since this is the, you can also see this is a long nose. It's nice and crisp. This is crisp, but it's not as crisp. It sounds good now. But this thing goes back and forth so many times, I wonder if it's just worn out. Oh yeah. Yeah. This has got a lot of, I don't know if you can see the movement. Not much movement. But anyhow, so if you do have this piece, and let's say it's not the switch. Let's say your motor died or your belt broke. The belt you can finagle off without taking anything apart. You can literally just pull it off and then pull it out and feed it back through behind this. So you don't have to worry about if that's your problem. Now, if you broke a gear, if you broke a I hate when it does that. When you have or if you have a bad motor. There we go. Some of these screws, the depth is bad, or not bad. It's just not as deep as the bit, so it can't grab. But anyway, if you have a bad gear or a bad motor, careful of all the rock. And then you take those 2 screws off there. And then, or excuse me, there should be 3, but they only have 2. Then you take these 2 screws off here. So, and now you can get to the screws. You don't have to take this one out to get to the screws technically. I am going to take it off so you can see how this thing is fully assembled. So if you have to replace your string or you want to lubricate it or something, this one has a washer and the screw. Then it just slides straight off. The gear is molded on, as you can see. So if this chips, the only way to fix it is to try and recast it or replace this. And that's the hard part. This thing is so old and they don't make replacement parts, yada, yada, yada. The same thing that all the companies tell you. So you'll have a slight problem. But once you get that out of the way, if it is in your way and you don't want to fish the screwdriver through, you then just have 3 screws that hold on your gearbox. These are rusty, which indicates that this thing was exposed to moisture, which may have prematurely made this fail. And here you go. Then there's a screw here and a screw here, which you can take off the belt or just move the belt to take the motor out. If your gearbox is bad, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 screws to take it apart. And inside you have a worm gear and a single transfer gear. So there's not much in this to break. It's also really good. This is also very stout. This is very thick plastic. There's a lot of screws holding together, so there's no deflection in the plastic, because I'm sure the torque on this is massive compared to like your standard spinning wheel or your character that comes out of a door and screams or what have you, because this has got to move these cars, which they're not overly heavy, but it's still mass on a cable that's curved, so it's going to bounce, which is going to put bouncing pressure on the gears, so they're not going to spin smoothly. They're going to have small, imperceivable to the human eye, jerk motions. So you have a very strong gearbox. You have actual plastic bushings too on the gear shafts, which is actually amazing. A lot of places and a lot of pieces don't do that anymore. So you have plastic gear bushings. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes sense. And you have a relatively thick belt. You have a metal drive pulley. On this model, this one has the plastic drive pulley, and this pulley is larger. So they made this pulley larger and this pulley smaller on the other piece. So that's why I said these are 2 different generations. I don't know which one's older. I don't know if there's a date code on any of these. Nothing stamped on that board. This board has a code, but it's just a manufacturing code. There's no code stamped on the motor, just a patent number. Well, I know the date's wrong because this motor says 04/02/24. So I don't think this motor is the... and this one says 05, and this piece wasn't around. I think it came out in 2000, 2002. So this motor is too new and this motor is wrong. But if you need to replace this motor is an SRF 500 12600. So it's an SRF 500. The 12600 is the RPMs, 12,600 RPMs. It's a standard motor. Sontronics has it, which is Happy Holidays with an S, parts with an S.com. And I'll link the motor below. The gears, pretty much the same thing. He should have the gears. This gear in here and the worm gear that drives it is their standard. The gear kits I have them, but I'm sure he has them too. This oversized gear has a D shaft. So a lot of the gears are on a round shaft that are knurled or splined and they're pressed on. because of the torque, this is shaped like the letter D. So that way the gear can't spin on the shaft and then use the knurling or splines as an auger and bore the centers out. So the D shaft provides a more secure attachment point, less likely to auger the center out. It still can, but there shouldn't be enough torque in here to do that. You'd spin the belt or slip the belt before you would technically destroy that gear. But this gear can chip just like any other gear. Happy Holly's parts may have that gear. Again, if that one breaks, you're screwed. Sorry. On the other end of the chain or cable is this one, which looks exactly the same as this one, except this one doesn't have a gear. So now if you ever take it apart to work on it for any reason, motor, gear, pulley, belt, doesn't matter, I would highly recommend lubricating it. Put a little bit of lubrication in the center under the screw, so in this hole on both sides. Same with these. If you can, take the screws out, put a little dab of PTFE grease, white PTFE grease. If you don't have any, Happy Holly's Parts sells the like a 6-pack of the little plastic vials. And on here, you put a little bit inside the gearbox if it's dry. Not a lot, you don't want it leaking out. And then a little bit on these pulleys here. And now you just take the screw out, put a little dab, push the screw back through, you're good to go. Just to prolong the life of the unit. Now, if you have this piece, I am hoping that you do not have any circuit board issues. Sorry, took me a second there. All the components on here are labeled, and then you can color code the resistors and match them and replace them. Again, this is going to be your problem if it fails. This might just be the switch, so I'm going to, like I said, locate a switch, but in the meantime I'm just going to swap the board, and then once I get a switch I'll test this board, see if it works. Just to, you know, just so I can get this back, because it is going on to Thanksgiving, and this is a Christmas display, so I want to try and get this, trying to get all the Christmas stuff done as fast as I can for people. But hopefully that helps break this down for you. When you take it apart, be aware you're going to have 1.5 pounds of gravel in here. Take apart the part that you plug in the power to get to the drive mechanism, the motor, the pulleys, belt, gears, so on and so forth. If you think your switch is failing, because if you did what I did, also it's not just failing there. When I was moving the wires, one of these connections is cracked. It looks like this one right here. So if it's stuttering, you might have a cracked solder connection, because there is one on his piece. There's not one here because I just resoldered it, so it's a good solder connection. But touch the solder up if you know how to solder. If you wiggle the wires and the motor stutters, that means you have a cracked solder connection. Other than that, you could technically no. So this switch has the wires on the back. So what I was thinking about doing was taking the power switch off of like mine and swapping it to see if it would work. But the wires on this switch are attached to the back, and this one solders to the board. So they're two different switches. They're the same style, just two different housings. So I can't even do that. I was trying to figure out a way to salvage his original stuff right now. But yeah, that's that. It's not terribly difficult to open this up and get to it. The hardest part is that gravel, and then you're going to have to put all that gravel back, or else it'll tip over. Maybe put the gravel in small Ziploc baggies and kind of wedge it into the base and into the house where it goes, because it's loose. Like I said, when I open it up, it just everywhere, all across the bench. It was on me, it was on the floor, and you definitely don't want to be stepping on gravel in the middle of the night with bare feet. So make sure you're aware of that. Maybe open it in like let's say a cat food box or a can box, little boxes, or a 2-inch side cardboard, and so that way when it spills out it's contained. A plastic container, something, because it's going to spill out. The gravel is not contained except for that one small spot in the bottom of the one house where there's one screw underneath it. They put tape over it. The rest of that square I showed you, and then this one's much larger square, is nothing but loose gravel. If you open it upside down, you're less likely to spill it, but this one has that tall mountain, and it's really hard. I mean, you got to reach all the way there and screw it, but you got to put it on its roof, which, if you notice, it's really hard. It's on its roof since it's got a chimney. So just be aware. I would not recommend gluing the gravel into place because you do need to get to the screws under the gravel, but little sandwich baggies might help if you're going to reassemble it. If you're going to use it for parts, then it doesn't matter. But then you could use the houses. You could put a little LED light bulb in there and just make them glow as a house instead of a gondola lift. But anyhow, so that's the insides of the Department 56 gondola. It isn't terribly difficult. It's a relatively easy piece to work on, minus the gravel, and the parts, minus the board, are relatively available. And the big pulleys. These little pulleys, you can find them in pulley kits. They might not be the exact same size, might be a hair bigger or smaller as far as height, but relatively they're easy. This pulley, good luck. And the board. So, but I gave you the chip number. This isn't like the new ones. It has the blob chip that conceals the number, and if you get it hot, it melts and falls off and the board's destroyed. This one is technically repairable or replaceable, but you have to desolder all those pins pretty much at the same time. Because if you heat the board too much, you can damage the capacitor, resistors, transistors, so on and so forth. The station I use that was giving me power to test this, that you heard beep when they set the strippers on top of the two alligator clips, is a rework station. That's what it's designed for. That heat pen that I always use, if you watch other videos, is part of that rework station. That's to heat up all these pins at once so the solder melts and you can pull the chip out. I will also link that below if it's something you're interested in getting. Some of the features of it, besides a soldering iron and a heat pen, which is adjustable in fan speed for the air, and it has different nozzles. It has a voltage out, so you can power stuff up to 15 volts at 2 amps max. If you go above that, it beeps at you. It has a USB port at 2 amps built into that anytime the machine is on, it has power coming out of it. So if you are working on a project and you want to charge your cell phone, it will charge your cell phone whether the machine is doing something or just sitting there idle, as long as the off-on switch is engaged. And it comes with a soldering holder that you see me put the, well, you hear it more than you see it off screen when I stick that in. It also comes with, some of them, the new ones, come with a solder cleaner. So it's something that you may get if you're a hobbyist, and you can use it for other things than just working on Limax or Department 56. The solder pen, or because it is a pen, it's not a gun, gets really hot, and it can work for that jewelry making where you're soldering the wires of brass or copper for making different designs for that stuff that you put into the oven for the glass, and you need to resolder the joints. It does get hot enough, and it comes with a multitude of tips, so it is something that you could use for other projects. The heat gun is good for melting things, burning yourself, but it's also good for heat shrink and removing bases when they're glued on. It does come with different tips. I usually stick with only 3 of like the 5 it comes with, because they're the right shaped nozzles for seams and joints. But you can also have it wide open where it's more like a blow dryer size nozzle. Well, not that big, but tight, so you get a lot of heat over a broad area. That's what you would kind of use for something like that. But yeah, so just to give you an idea on how that comes off. If you have a freestanding heat pen, you can do it the same way. Heat gun usually produces way too much heat over a broad surface. Some of them do come with nozzles, but usually the nozzles aren't small enough. So you'd want nozzles, if you were going to desolder, that did stuff like this, where it's, you know, the width of the chip. And that's why I use a rework station, is because it helps me with what I do for myself, and when I help others with pieces like this, to kind of point the air where I need it to go, since the air, the max on it is something like 600. Let's take a look. I I've never maxed out the air. But, oh, if you do get them, they're all in 480 degrees Celsius. Everything's in Celsius. So you have to learn how to convert the metric system. I usually keep mine around 250. I'm trying to get back to 250 so I can turn it back off. 250. And the soldering station, it goes up to, oh geez, like 400 too. 480 degrees. And I keep mine at usually between 225 and 250. So, yeah, if you convert that to SAE, I think it's like 900 and some odd degrees. So they get really, really hot. So be careful. But anyhow, that's just what I use to take this stuff apart. And that's what you might need to invest in if you want to do more circuit board stuff. You can get away with other things. I just found the rework station's everything you need in one package. And it's not huge. It's almost as big as a shoebox. So, but anyway, if you have this piece, watch the gravel, take the screws out. Everything's housed in the big house. Everything except for the few things I pointed out is available from like Happy Holiday Parts, and some of this stuff is actually available in the generic gear kits I usually post below from Amazon or eBay as an example. The only issue you may ever encounter is the switch, which I'll have to try and find these side mount switches with a long nose. Shouldn't be too hard. They're usually pretty standard, but I don't have any. And the chip. And like I said, the two chip numbers, the basic number is the same, but the submodels are different. One's Texas Instruments, one's not. The Texas Instrument chip is usually better. They don't make them anymore. So it's a trade-off. But that is the Gondola. If you have it, it is a neat piece. I've seen it work in action. So, but I don't do Christmas or snow stuff in general. So, but if you've never really seen it, here's one of the cars. You can see the wreaths. Car number 5 with it says skis on the outside. And then you have car number 6 with skis and the wreaths again. And then the broken set right there. And then you got the pulley system. Well, this one doesn't have that. This one is just tied on, if I remember right. They're just hollow plastic. They're not very heavy, which makes it easier for the unit to do its thing. If you break the string, they do sell this string. I have it in white, but it's a tight nylon string, and you can replace the string when it dry rots, because inevitably everything will. And if you store it someplace that gets relatively warm, there you go. So, all right, well, thanks for watching. The innards of the innards of the Department 56 Gondola.